Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Point Counterpoint. Here's your host, Got Mark 76. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Point Counterpoint. I am your host, Mark Lindsay, aka Got Mark 76. And as always, I am joined by my tag team partner, Bob Stedford. Bob, how are you today?
I'm doing well over here, just waiting for that hot tag. Get started. We got a really interesting topic for everyone today. Make sure you go on to our YouTube page, hit like and subscribe, and you can find me on Instagram at @B_steady, and then on Facebook at the Brothers McIntyre.
Awesome. Thanks for the plug, and of course, subscribe to Got Mark 76. Subscribe to DJB Productions Network. We have an interesting show today, Bob. Crack it open.
Let me get started. I like to drink and talk about wrestling. Oh, it's too low.
It's 95 degrees.
I've had plenty today. 4th of July, that was another story.
So, an interesting development has happened, unless you're living under a rock. And if you're watching this show, chances are you're very familiar. And that is the Speaking Out Movement, Bob. And
yes.
One thing we want to talk about today is why was this not covered by a larger news outlet? SI.com picked it up. Bleacher Report discussed it, but
it
this
went
wasn't
nowhere.
Yeah,
it really and it was just it was a hiccup. You would think Sports Illustrated picked it up. Bleacher Report's not as big an outlet as Sports Illustrated, but if you were taught so everybody that doesn't know, a couple weeks ago there was a Speaking Out movement. It seemed like the world of British wrestling, for the most part, was completely upended out of nowhere. And you had all these people coming out of the woodwork, both men and women, talking about how they were taken advantage of sexually, and they were speaking out, which good for them. But also, we live in this culture of not knowing, people are already, instead of being assumed innocent until proven guilty, everyone is guilty nowadays until proven innocent because of social media. And it makes it very tough to weigh out what's true and what's not true. So back about 2 weeks ago, all these allegations started coming out, and it was mostly British wrestlers at first, and then it came over to our side of the pond, and people were getting named left and right. You have Matt Riddle, who's probably arguably the biggest name right now, that was accused, and he came out, vehemently denied it, showed proof from a lawyer that this woman stalking him, and then you get news today or yesterday that, well, I'm going to admit to some of it, but, I didn't do anything inappropriate. I just cheated on my wife. And it's what kind of bullshit is that?
Yeah,
bro.
Right, exactly.
But if this was the MLB, if this was Major League Baseball, National Football League, NBA, even hockey, this would be all over CNN. This would be all over MSNBC. And I just, for the life of me, I can't understand. This thing was huge and dominated the wrestling news scene for so long.
See, I think I have a reason why. I think the non-wrestling fans look down. We know they look down on wrestling. They laugh at us for being fans. And I think when you had the steroid trials, the sex scandals, the drug overdoses, the Benoit murders,
yes.
They have numbed people who aren't wrestling fans down. So I think anybody who even remotely paid attention to wrestling and heard about Speaking Out, they didn't really feel shocked by it. And yeah. I'll go as far as to say that I think a lot of non-wrestling fans would assume that this kind of behavior was going on, which just is even sadder if you ask me.
Yeah.
Because it's another black eye, and how many eyes had to be black in wrestling? I mean, there's not many left.
Exactly, it's an old boys club business, and
yeah.
I hate to say it, but it is. I spent 10 years or so working the indies, and my brother and I did shows for a company called Dangerous Women of Wrestling, and we had one locker room, and we were the only male match booked on the show. And we're in the locker room, and there's just women whipping off their clothes. I was 18 years old at the time. This was the time of my life. I enjoyed it. And then it came to one point where I had a girl sitting on my lap getting changed, and she was half naked. And I even at that age, I just know because the way my parents raised me, that, you know, you keep your hands to yourself and, you know, be respectful of women. But, you know, the more and more time you spend in this business, like that starts to devolve. And like you're trying to pop the boys, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're gonna do like you're gonna get buried if you stand up for yourself and be like, well, that's not cool. Like it's this weird counterculture of like, hey, just do whatever you want. There are no consequences. It's a Wild West in the wrestling business, and now we're starting to see those consequences.
Do you think that because of all the negative stuff in the past, that this didn't have the same impact? Do you think that it's just because people look down so much on wrestling, they just didn't care?
I think it's a mixture of both, but to me, at the same point in time, like you would think this would be something the major outlets would salivate over.
Right.
Like
They hate
you could get
wrestling.
a couple news cycles out of this, and like you bring on former wrestlers and let them be interviewed and what the things that they saw. Like think when Benoit died.
Yeah.
That awful human being Nancy Grace, the way she exposed the wrestling business and was bringing people on under false pretense of what they were going to talk about, and then ambushing them with her agenda.
Right. Yep.
And like I would think that this would have been that same kind of story, but it didn't go anywhere. And like I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like if you want to make change, you need as many people to know about the change as possible.
I also want to know, do you think because the bulk of this happened in Europe, that maybe it's not as... We know Joey Ryan, Jim Cornette. We know
Sure.
names that have come out. But because the bulk of it came from Europe, do you think that may play a part in it as well?
I think so, yeah. But I also think with, like, to bring it back up again, Matt Riddle, who has been somewhat of a focal point of it, like an unrelenting focal point of this. Like, he's a big enough name from his UFC crossover appeal. So you would think, like, that would be a name that they could use. But outside of that, maybe it's just like if you had John Cena get named on this list, then that's a different ball game. I think maybe what you were alluding to earlier, the lack of star power for a lack of better words, and like top guys getting named, then maybe that's why it's getting buried in the major news outlets.
Yeah, because a lot of these, no offense, they're all independent promotions, and they're all...
Sure.
And you've said it many times on our show. You got paid with a hot dog and a soda.
Hot dog and a handshake.
There you go, hot dog and a handshake.
If you were lucky.
So, like, again, do we know more about the business than the casual non-fan who would just look down on it anyway? So we're more, I don't want to say we're more accepting of it, but this kind of hit us harder than it hit other people because
Sure.
it was a shock. And you brought up a great point with Matt Riddle. I want to kind of tie it into to Jim Cornette. The allegations made against Jim Cornette. The allegations made against Jim Cornette were that, and I just discovered this word on my other podcast. I didn't know what a cuck was, or a cook, or whatever the hell it was.
I don't think I'm fully clear on what it is either, but that's a different kind of podcast.
Well, Jim Cornette apparently likes to watch his wife have sex with other men. And Jim Cornette apparently is in the room and he watches this. And there is somebody watching at home who's very sad to hear this news. So
we know who.
So I would imagine in the weeks that followed since Jim Cornette's allegations came to light, he has not once denied it. Now, he denied that he used that for power. Like, he denied that he would never, under any circumstances, ever give somebody an ultimatum where he could get them a job if he did this. He denied that, but he didn't deny the actual act of watching his wife have sex with men. Are you a fan of the Showtime show Billions, Bob?
Oh, I love Billions. That's one of the best.
So this reminds me of a Charlie Rhodes where he comes out. For those who don't know, Charlie Rhodes is the district attorney in New York.
Giamatti.
Paul Giamatti, yes. And him and his wife do BSM, or he likes, they're very kink. They like the kink.
Like
and he comes out,
style.
Yes. So he comes out and gets discovered that he's going to a dominatrix, and he just runs with it. He goes full steam ahead. I'm going to come clean. We're going to use this to our advantage. And he does. And I think that's the approach that Cornette took without really saying, oh, yeah, this happened. but he didn't deny it, and that just spells everything.
Exactly, because he might not have outright said, well, hey, you're not going to get promoted to the main roster if you don't bang my wife out. But like stuff like that could be strongly implied when you're in a position of power, and you don't need to outright say it. People know. Like I know that like if I don't do what Dan tells me to do, I'm not going to get my paycheck. But no,
will you stop?
On a serious note, though, like if I was at my job and my boss told me to do something, I didn't do it. There's certainly implications, be it right or wrong, and he could ask me to do something that might be in the handbook or ask me to do something extracurricular. And in this case, it's extracurriculars. And you know, when you're a young wrestler, you'll do anything to get to that main roster.
Yeah,
even conquer his monster that he's got at home.
I'm not laughing. That's not funny.
That's a task too.
No comment. Okay, because
you got to pop a Blue Chew gimmick for that.
I'm a task. Okay, so let's
oh, you're a drink.
So let's tie this in. You mentioned it earlier. Matt Riddle. He kind of came out and he did a video explanation of and you mentioned it earlier that it was more or less an affair he had with his wife. And I think, let me ask you this. Let me just ask you this question, Bob. Do you think coming out and denying it is the right move, or do you think he should wait for lawyers to get involved and take it to court?
I honestly think with his notoriety and his place in the business, I think it's always better to wait for a lawyer, let a lawyer craft a statement. I get where he's coming from, but like now he just kind of looks foolish.
Yeah.
Because when this first happened, nah, she's a liar, she's stalking me. Like, that's a bad look. Like, he's gaslighting this poor girl who now he's 2 weeks later or a week later. I have no conception of time in the COVID era. He's gaslighting this girl, and, like, she's getting death threats and stuff I read on Twitter. Like, again, you don't know how much of anything is true just because of the whole social media aspect of people wanting the attention. And it's tough when it comes to this kind of stuff because you don't know what is true. But like this poor girl's getting gaslit, and now Riddle is coming out. It's super slimy. Like he's coming out now saying, "Well, yeah, I did cheat with her." Like, but the weeks prior, he made her out to be this crazy woman who's a stalker and has restraining orders out against her and stuff. But here he's having an affair with her, but he never did anything that wasn't consensual. Yeah. All of a sudden. And now, like I'm starting to lean to believe the girl because his story has no continuity to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he just came up to the main roster. This is a guy that we've been fans of. I mean, you guys have gone to witness him in action on the independent scene. And
I've met him numerous times. I have nothing but positive things to say from my experience. So, that doesn't mean I'm gonna turn a blind eye to the shitty things he might be doing.
Right, and it comes at a bad, it's always bad timing, but it makes it seem like this was, all these allegations came out within a span of 2 or 3 days, several weeks ago. So it makes it seem to me like this was discussed before it happened and became such a big thing, and kind of related to the uprise of Matt Riddle to the main roster. He was promoted to SmackDown, was kind of inserted right away into a big storyline. You kind of had the same thing happen with Marty Scurll over in Europe, who's the main booker for Ring of Honor.
Did anything more come from that? I'm not up to date on Marty. I love Marty. In fact, I'm wearing my
my
Marty Scurll hat on.
Villain Enterprises.
I'm not ready to crucify him yet because I don't know what's what.
So the last thing I know of, and if there's more, please comment below in the section below. But the last thing I recall reading was that he went on a lengthy Twitter rant saying that it was consensual, that he was with a 16-year-old girl, but that's the legal age over in Europe.
Yes.
And he apologized to her father, and then the last thing I heard was that the father and then the accuser just more or less said he was classless and this and that, and that's the last thing I heard. I don't know any more allegations, but COVID COVID is a real thing, WWE, even though they don't announce it. AEW does a fantastic job of admitting that.
Absolutely.
COVID is a real thing. You know, we've seen Evolve get sold to WWE. Another allegation was against Mike Quackenbush, and Chikara is gone. So
That's done.
A lot of independent wrestling promotions will not survive COVID, and Ring of Honor has to be on the cusp as well. And you just have your main booker Marty Scurll, who has connections in the NWA, has connections in AEW with the Elite, and could have probably pre-COVID, or if COVID didn't exist, could have probably spun some working relationships that now you're just wondering, well, forget the business. What's Marty Scurll going to do? Because you can't walk away from this unscathed.
Yeah, and like there's a stink on him now. Be it true or be it not, right now there's stink until he's proven guilty or innocent. And like that's a bargaining chip that other companies aren't going to work with. And like you brought up NWA Power, Dave Lagana, who was their was he like their VP right under Billy Corgan?
Left, and NWA sent a big tweet out. They said, he's no longer with us, and you made fun of the melancholy tour money, but NWA can't afford that. And I mean, Lagana was a big, huge deal for them to land.
I agree.
And
his resume speaks for itself in the wrestling business. And like now they're losing talent. Like they can't even hold on to their contracts because they can't live up to their end of it. And you got guys like Ricky Starks, who's like a blue chip prospect in my eyes. And the same goes for Zicky Dice, who are now free agents. And like those were two of their top guys. Zicky Dice had a title at the time. And Ricky Starks, a former champion there. Like, somebody else, the NWA's loss is going to be somebody else's big game.
So let me ask you this question then, Bob, as a former wrestler. So we just discussed how COVID has kind of just like changed the world around us, let alone the world of wrestling. Do you think if COVID wasn't around, that these guys or gals would be able to kind of lay low for a while and go somewhere else? Or do you think COVID can actually help them in the long run, because maybe by the time wrestling comes back, they'll have a chance to come back as well?
I honestly don't know. I don't know the answer to that, because wrestling fans are so fickle, and they change on a dime. Like they'll turn on a dime on somebody. And I don't know. Like I really think that if there wasn't COVID going on right now, like if we were in normal world as we knew it in February, like I really think that maybe this would have been major news. But maybe that's part of going back to why the major outlets didn't pick it up. Maybe because there's more pressing things with this pandemic that they don't want to break the news cycle for like a off the cuff sport, because I know we're going to jump into it later, but wrestling's just not as mainstream as it used to be. So I guess my answer to that question is it would probably it's probably better off that it happened in the COVID era.
Yeah, I think, I kind of answered my own question. I think that having a little bit of a, not the attention on this situation may have helped them in the long run. Of course, time will tell.
And then when we get crowds back to shows, people are just going to be so damn happy to be in an arena and see some wrestling again. All that's going to be forgotten, be it for right or wrong.
Was there anybody else with allegations that you wanted to bring up, Bob?
I guess the one that really bothered me the most was David Starr. I don't know how familiar you are with David Starr, but David Starr has been a voice for independent wrestling for a long time. He's sick. He was very vocal about the way wrestlers were treated and there needing to be benefits, a better retirement plan, like unionizing wrestling, like Ventura tried to do back in the day. I don't know if a union is necessary. If a union is necessarily the way to go, but like his intentions were so good, and like he was a really talented wrestler. He had charisma, like he was good in the ring, like, and just his presence outside the ring and like what he brought, like via intelligence and social media. Like I followed the dude on Facebook and Instagram, and he's educated, he's well spoken, he knows what he's talking about, And then I hear these allegations to him, and then he essentially admits to him, then just vanishes with no explanation. It's like this guy that, like, I was like, all right, I can get behind this guy. And now we're just kind of left like, all right, David Starr, explain yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got so much to say every other time. Like, you own up to it. Be a man.
One question I had as well. You mentioned David Starr. He admitted it, and he kind of just left the face of the earth. Somebody else who kind of admitted it, but not really, was Tessa Blanchard, who got let go from Impact Wrestling as their champion, by the way.
Oh, I know.
Do you think AEW or NXT picks or takes a chance on Tessa with her history?
Honestly, like, I think what the best move to do before Tessa's a locker room problem. She has been. She's got a terrible attitude. That's been very well known. Anybody who's been in a locker room with her has spoken out against it. She doesn't have many people in her corner. So honestly, I think Tessa needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror right now and figure out if she wants to be in this wrestling business, she's got to change her attitude, because she operates under this attitude of my shit doesn't stink, and her shit stinks plenty right now. The reason though she got let go, I don't think had to do with the SpeakOut movement.
No,
because that at her, like the quote unquote SpeakOut happened for her the night before TNA.
She won the title.
Put the title on it, and they still rolled with her and still went with it. She got fired because she just wasn't being a team player. Right. But before anybody signs her, they need to sign her, and if AEW signs her, they need to put her on like a 10-week steady diet of working AEW Dark. No Dynamite, no pay-per-views, no TV. And you see how that attitude is. It's a conditional contract, and you do the same thing with NXT. Do I think she's a main roster performer? Beyond a shadow of a doubt. But she's at the point now where I think she needs to prove that she can be a team player.
We've heard stories in the past of guys who weren't. Like, what comes to mind to me is The Miz. The Miz had this reputation of being this locker room brat. JBL did some fun stuff in his boots one time. But The Miz learned, and he got better, and he adjusted. He got a world title run. I'm not saying it's because he was better in the locker room, but it can happen. People can change.
I'm not ready to write her off yet. I want to see her grow as a person and prove that she is this superstar that she can be.
Right. It was only 3 years ago she was in the Mae Young Classic, and it just seems like there's time for her, but it's running out. You know, she needs to really make a change now if she wants to continue being a wrestler and making a good living at being a wrestler.
And she's got that Blanchard pedigree. She's already a step up.
I mean, that's what I'm saying right there. Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing. Look, I would love AEW to swallow her up, be a member of the Horsemen. Yeah. You know, it's there, and maybe I don't know how close she is to Tully. I heard that she's closer to Magnum, but I think maybe having good people like Cody, Brandy, Tully, Dustin, Arn in that locker room might kind of direct her to a better place. You know, all speculation, but you know, whatever. And you know, obviously, Bob, we talked about COVID. We talked about these allegations of the Speaking Out movement. And that's going to kind of tie into our final topic, which is, for you, Bob, when did wrestling stop being fun? When was it stop being cool to be a fan?
So that's kind of a double-edged question for me, because, again, with my being in the wrestling business, I got in the wrestling business in 2002, I believe, is when I first started training. And, like, there was this whole culture back then of, like, oh, you can't be a fan. Like you get into the wrestling business because you're a mark.
Yeah.
I'm a mark. You're a mark, more than just namesake. But, like, we're all marks. Like, we love the wrestling business. We're doing this show right now because we're marks.
Yep, I agree.
It's a term I own, and it's a term that I wish I could have owned when I started, because I missed so much good stuff. But so I guess I would say early 2000s for me is when it stopped being cool, because it was pushed on me that, oh, you can't mark out for this. Don't be wearing wrestling T-shirts. If you work a show with a guy that used to be in the Fed, don't take a picture with them. Don't be marking out with them. Like now, never have gone anywhere in my wrestling career. Like I look back on those times, and I'd give anything to take pictures with the guys I met and like just relive that in a different kind of way. But like when growing up as a '90s kid, like you had ECW, which was hotter than hot. You had the NWO, you had the Attitude Era. Like all three companies were so mainstream. And in my middle school, there were three tiers of kids. You had an ECW shirt, like that was like the punk rock. Then you had the NWO, which was like, okay, you're listening to alternative. And then you had the Attitude Era, which was like, oh, your mainstream stuff. But like, if you had that NWO shirt, that Austin 316 shirt, or an ECW shirt, you were one of the cool kids in school. Now I would be terrified if my kids wanted to wear a wrestling shirt to school.
Well, for me, my answer is kind of the same as yours. I trained to become a wrestler. The great Johnny Casimir and Trent Acid at PWU. Yes, they took me under their wing, and I never knew I could do front bumps. I never knew I could do things. But you know what I couldn't do, Bob, was a collar and elbow tie-up. And I swear to God, you laugh, but if you don't have a good collar and elbow tie-up, you just don't make it in the business.
Were you going knee ankle? Or
no.
Like, it's collar and
yes.
elbow.
Yes, I know. And Johnny Casimir, bless his soul, and he would spend hours with me trying to get it. I just couldn't do it. But everything else I trained with them
for a little bit as well. They were both unforgivingly patient.
Yes. Well, absolutely they were. Yeah.
Super nice dudes. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. But same thing, those of us who were training were security. And when it stopped being, I had to watch Trent Acid versus, who was it? Moore? Devin Moore.
Devin's another good dude.
So they would do these insane spots at the ECW arena, and then I had to get the table and the chair out of the ring. Well, I'm like,
you're watching the match being a fan.
Right. I was like, oh my God. And then I'll never forget, it was when Rob Van Dam won the world title, finally, in WWE. And then he and Sabu got arrested for pot in Philadelphia. I will never, because we were training that Monday night, that Raw, and then we watched Raw together at the arena on the big screen. And everybody is calling out blown spots. This move was missed. That's a Ziggy. All this stuff got called out. And I'm like, oh God, like everything got broken down. And I think for me, that's when I lost a lot of interest in wrestling. And I kind of took after I stopped training, I took about a year off from 06 to 07.
It took me years to get back to being a fan. And I love where I'm at right now. I really enjoy it. And I can go back and watch all that stuff that I missed and enjoy it like it's the first time I'm seeing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that kind of leads me back to where I wanted to end, is because there was a long time where Cena was the main guy.
Yeah.
And the company just did its thing, and there was no competition because TNA, as hard as they tried, they just didn't have it. Whatever it is, they didn't have it. But then in the early 2010s, you had NXT, you had the network, and you had all these things kind of come together. And I think from about 2014 till about maybe even last year, it was cool to be a wrestling fan again. But
absolutely.
I don't think it's there now, because I think it's COVID that is causing that. But it's been a roller coaster. It's been either a cycle or a roller coaster, whatever you want to call it. It will come back.
It's also not the easiest content to digest. Like, I don't watch wrestling because of the crowd, but wrestling is meant to be in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
Wrestling is not meant to be in quiet buildings. And, like, just speaking of WWE, like, how long did it take for them to adapt? They're a company that's been in business forever. Like, it took them forever to start putting people in the crowd. And even when they did it, it was super awkward. Like, they put plexiglass up like they were playing hockey. Like, I still don't understand the point of that, and it's just weird. Sure, it gives somebody something to bang on, but like AEW is a brand new company, arguably launched a year ago, say. even though their TV started in October, they had that thing figured out week 1 in COVID, and they're putting on entertaining shows. But it's just not enough. Like, you just lose so much. Like last night, Orange Cassidy versus Chris Jericho. That match was great. I enjoyed it. They told a great story. But my God, could you imagine just how much better that would have been if they had their prototypical AEW crowd there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you're losing stuff there. So, like, the old saying with WWE, you always hear all the guys that get released or they ask for their release. They always say, everything in WWE could always be better. Nobody cares to make it better.
Right.
It's just that's what would have made it better. Like, AEW is doing everything that they can do right now to make it good, but having a crowd is what's going to make it better, because there's a certain electricity that having a live crowd brings.
Absolutely. And I'm interested in what the people watching this are. You know, I'm talking to you, and in this corner, I'm talking to you, Facebook, YouTube. What do you guys think? When was it cool to be a fan? Is it cool now to be a fan? And
yeah, I'd like to see the reaction on that myself. I'm very curious where everybody else fell off, because we've been watching wrestling. I've been watching wrestling for about like 32 years now, and I've fallen off. I've come back, but like I've always had the staple of Monday nights are for Raw. Right. Since 1993, Monday nights are for Raw. Mark, I God's honest truth, I couldn't tell you the last time I sat and watched Monday Night Raw. It's insufferable to me, and like there's a part of my childhood that wants to die, and can't believe that I'm not watching Raw anymore. It's heartbreaking, but it's just like they don't try that hard.
I agree, and I'm gonna try and one up you. The last 2 weeks of AEW, well, AEW was live last week. It was taped the other night, and the same thing with the Great American Bash. It was live last week, taped night 2.
Yeah.
Spoilers were out there, and I did a great job of avoiding them because
me too. I did see the Keith Lee spoiler.
Yeah.
And WWE did do a good job of planting that seed as to, oh, well, we filmed 2 endings.
Right.
And you only saw the picture for one.
It would have been great if that was true, but
yeah.
You know, could you imagine?
I haven't seen NXT yet, but like, it does lose a little something when it's taped too. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense. I didn't see the results, but
right.
I don't know.
But you could tell because Tony Schiavone does the post, voiceovers, and it doesn't sound as crisp.
It's not as polished. Like,
right.
It's a little too polished.
Yeah. Well, could you imagine, and I'm going to steal this idea from my friend Nick on my other podcast, Entrance Ramp, where he said back at WrestleMania, John Cena versus Bray Wyatt, if they had 2 separate endings, the West Coast got one ending, the East Coast got the other, and you had fans on social media going back and forth with who won the match. Like, the people on the East Coast, right? Like, the East Coast would say, oh, Cena won again. And the people on the West Coast, what are you talking about? Bray Wyatt won. No, Cena won. Like, that would be awesome if they could do something like that. But, again, we're smarter than the people who are making millions of dollars writing the stuff.
Exactly. We're armchair bookers.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? If Tony Khan or Vince McMahon ever watches the show, I'm available.
Yeah, I am too.
Bob, thank you for joining us. A half hour went fast just like that.
That was easy, buddy.
It was.
This tag team right here, it's working. 5 seconds in and out.
I'll be the Ricky Morton, and then I'll make the hot tag to Robert Gibson. We'll do it all the time.
Oh, man. Can we be the Midnight Express next week?
Oh, yeah, you got it.
We'll roll with you. Rock and rolls this week. Bring your tassels, brother.
I'll bring my tassels. I'll be Sweet Stan. You be Beautiful Bob. You carry me next week, Bob.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, hey, for Point Counterpoint, that is Bob Stedford. I am Mark Lindsay. Hit subscribe to Got Mark 76. Hit subscribe to DJB Productions Network, and we will see you next week. Goodbye, everybody. The proceeding was brought to you by Got Mark 76 and That Way Cool Wrestling Show. Please subscribe to Got Mark 76 and DJB Productions Network on YouTube. And until next time, we'll see you at the matches.